João, muito obrigada. Estava aqui a ver imagens enquanto te ouvia e estava a pensar em pegar em ti e ir para o wakeboard. O que é que tu achas? Pensa sobre o assunto com
Prefiro o wakeboard do que o hidrofoil, acho eu.
Hidrofoil também não conheço ainda, mas vou ir passar. Muito obrigada, João, e até já. Ora, muito bem, queria só começar esta segunda parte. Chamemos de uma segunda parte, sim, temos sempre muito conteúdo a acontecer aqui neste site. Já agora aproveitar para dizer a todos que estamos em Waterworld Forum, aliás, estão a ver .com, e portanto, se puderem, por favor, partilhem o link para chegarmos a mais gente. Hoje falamos de ideias muito importantes e, portanto, é muito importante que estejam connosco. Reparem como a pessoa que escreveu estes pivôs, tenho ao meu lado o Vítor Gonçalves, mas já lá vamos, a pessoa que escreveu estes pivôs me conhece. Vou ler. Estão prontos? Reparem. Algumas das grandes ideias da humanidade surgem descritas em 3 palavras, diz a pessoa que escreveu. Querem exemplos? Liberdade, igualdade e fraternidade, chegar, ver e vencer, ou mesmo Sporting Clube de Portugal. Desculpem, foi só um disparate, mas a pessoa conhece-me, não é? Também é verde, também é ecológico, cai que nem ginjas. Gostaram? O nosso operador da grua gostou. É claramente o Sporting, mas foi só. Mas esta questão das 3 palavrinhas não está aqui à toa. Vou explicar. Por exemplo, a Exposição Universal Dubai 2020 dedicar-se-á a 3 temas principais: oportunidade, mobilidade e sustentabilidade. O tópico da nossa próxima conversa é exatamente a mobilidade sustentável, tão importante. A fórmula química que mais gente conhece no mundo é, obviamente, H2O, e é sobre os 2 átomos de hidrogênio desta bela molécula que vamos falar agora no painel sobre mobilidade sustentável, a era do hidrogênio. Vamos ter connosco Lígia Fonseca, Senior Manager for External Relations do IATA, Jérémie Lagarrigue, que é o CEO da EODev, Ricardo Jorge, Amaral, Diretor de Comunicação, Marketing e Produto da Toyota Caetano, Portugal, e Tom Strang, Chairman da Environment Advisory Committee for Europe, a moderar o debate. O grande, até porque ele é bastante alto, o grande, o extraordinário, eu gosto muito, sou fã, Vítor Gonçalves. Podemos uma salva de palmas, por favor? Muito obrigada, Cristina.
Olá,
Vítor, é consigo.
Muito obrigado. Bom dia a todos. Good morning, everyone. We will speak in English because 2 of our guests will speak with us in English. So, again, good morning, everyone. My name is Vítor Gonçalves. I will be your host for the next 40 minutes. The main topic of our debate will be sustainable mobility, the hydrogen age. And our guests, as Filomena has just said, are Lígia Fonseca here on stage with me. Lígia Fonseca is Senior Manager for External Relations of the International Air Transport Association. And by video call, Jérémie Lagarrigue, CEO of EODev, a company that develops and industrializes sustainable energy solutions. Ricardo Jorge Amaral. Ricardo is the Communication, Marketing and Product Director of Toyota Caetano, Portugal. And finally, Tom Strang, Chairman of CLIA, the world's largest cruise industry trade association. And good morning again of my guests for this debate. And I will start with Lígia because she is with me on the stage.
Yes, good morning.
Lígia, is hydrogen being considered as a solution for the aviation right now?
Thanks first for inviting us, for inviting IATA. Yes, hydrogen is being considered as a solution for aviation, but not as a standalone solution, let's say. So it needs to be combined with other technologies, other pathways that we are developing towards sustainability. So to be short in the answer, we would say that yes, hydrogen is a really potential source for sustainability in the future, but it's not available right now. So there is a path that we need to take in order to be available for the society and for aviation.
What are the main limitations or the main obstacles to use hydrogen in aviation right now?
Okay, so right now it's not available yet. It will be available. So the manufacturers of airplanes told us that they are envisaging to have new airplanes with hydrogen, fueled by hydrogen, in 2035. So it's still more than a decade ago.
2035 is the horizon, is the
yes.
where we should look.
Yes, we will see ourselves flying in hydrogen-powered airplanes in 2035. But that is a long horizon. So until then, we need to have other solutions because our commitment as an industry to environment is immediate. It's an immediate commitment. Also a long term, but we are also having solutions to implement right now that allow us to be sustainable as of today and not to wait for a standalone solution in 2035. So in terms of limitations, we have a few. The first one is the technology is not available yet, so only in 2035 it will be available. And this time will allow us to redesign the aircraft because the current airplanes that we know are not suitable to house hydrogen fuel. Yes,
hydrogen.
Yeah, the storage is the fuel tankings for hydrogen, for liquid hydrogen, need to be considerably different, need to be bigger. So another limitation due to this is that we will only have the capacity for some airplanes to have those tanks for short routes. So this means that we will probably start the first airplanes as commuters between some secondary or tertiary cities that don't have a high-speed train, for instance, or other means of transport. So we cannot see, as of today, hydrogen being used in long haul, for instance. So step by step we will get there, but it's not available yet. And finally, one important limitation is the funding that is required for all.
Because it's very expensive.
Exactly, exactly. We may ask, and policymakers, governments and states, we all aim to have this technology available. But the research and development that this requires asks for a lot of funding. There must be a public effort and a public commitment towards getting to that sustainability that we all want.
Jérémie Lagarrigue, can you introduce your company and what are your main goals and what are the main projects that you have developed yet?
Yes, thank you for the invitation and thank you for the presentation. In fact, it's true that there is a difference of timing depending on the industry. Just in the plane, as it is one of the, let's say, most dangerous place. If there is any incident, you do not want to have anything. While in the boat or in the industry, which is on the land, you have already some development. So 3 days ago, we light the Eiffel Tower with a genset, which is just behind me. And we are producing some hydrogen generators thanks to the Toyota fuel cell, which is transforming the hydrogen into electricity. And we have a capacity of production about 800 units per year in France, but we are developing this production to go in other places in Europe and soon in other continents. And those generators will come on place on the hydrogen genset, which are based mainly used, for the backup application, the power generation when you are out of the grid, and also sometimes replacing the generator you have inside of the boat, which is the smallest one just close to me, and where we can just, most of the boat, like cars, now they are hybrid boats, where the propeller is engaged with the electric engine, and we are producing this electricity thanks to hydrogen generators, which allow now to have new solutions which are zero emission, very quiet, very silent. The lifetime is also longer than a diesel generator because you do not have many parts which are turning in movement. And it will be also, it is already a lot more respectful to the planet and for the next generation.
Jérémie, you have the first clean energy self-sufficient hydrogen vessel. Can you tell us more about this project?
Yeah, in fact, it's true. We designed 7 years ago the first autonomous vessel going all around the world. And the boat, when I'm speaking with you now, is in between San Francisco and Hawaii. That it's a boat that demonstrates what will be the grid of the future, where we are taking all the natural energies around us. We are taking the sun, we are taking the wind, we are taking the heat and the cool of the water to produce energy. We are storing the energy as a short term in the batteries, and as a long term, we are storing this energy into the hydrogen, meaning that we have an electrolyzer on board, and we are storing this electricity energy in hydrogen because the hydrogen is between 5 to 8 times lighter than the storage of the batteries, and also when we are using the wind, then we have some wings and not sails, because wings are a lot more efficient than sails. And those wings help us to move the boat. And when we go faster than 7 to 10 knots, we can produce electricity with the propeller.
Não sabemos.
We engage the propeller backwards and we are creating electricity. And the overall efficiency of the boat is more than 80%. We go up to the North Pole, close to one of the coolest places you can go with a boat. And now also we were going to the equator, which is one of the hottest points you can sail on a boat. And we are showing that those technology, solar panels, electrolyzer, hydrogen fuel cell, can work everywhere around the world. And this is a demonstration what can be the town of the future.
Right now I'll call Ricardo Amaral. Good morning, Ricardo.
Good morning.
Toyota is a leading key player in this market. How is your company investing in sustainable mobility?
Okay, first of all, thanks for the invitation to the World Water Forum. So Toyota has an objective to achieve neutral carbon neutrality in 2050. So we have this challenge, and the objective is to achieve this through the life cycle of the life cycle of the product. So it's not only manufacturing, operating the cars, this all the process, refueling. So during this process, we want to achieve zero emissions. And hydrogen is part of this strategy. Some companies and some people believe that the best way to achieve this goal is by concentrate all the resources in only one in only one technology. In Toyota, we believe that we should invest in several technologies, because we think it's going to be faster and it will be more inclusive to achieve this goal of zero emissions around the globe. So we start this journey some years ago in '97 with the first Prius. So we start to sell the first electrified vehicle then, and since then we sell more than 17 electrified cars since '97. So to build electrified vehicles is on Toyota DNA, and that's what we're doing. In terms of hydrogen, how you see hydrogen in this vision? We start investing in hydrogen in 1992. It was when Toyota started investigating. In 2015, we launched the first generation of Mirai. It was the first fuel cell sedan car that was produced massively. And this year, in 2021, we launched the second generation of Mirai. This is a very unique car because it's a zero-emission car, and it's a car that only produces water, because in the end, it leaves water behind. And it has also a very nice curiosity, because it's a car that cleans also the air, because when the air comes up to the fuel cell of the car, we have some specific filters that remove the nocive particles that are in the ambient, like the NOx. And so the air that comes out of the car, it's more cleaner. So it's a car that's zero emissions, and it helped the environment. So Toyota vision is that this kind of technology is not only for cars, but we are also investing in other types of mobility. For example, like Jérémie said about the Energy Observer is a project that Toyota is supporting, but we are also using these fuel cells in other kind of vehicles like trucks, buses. We have in Portugal, in my company, in Caetano Group, we produce buses with fuel cell. So our vision is to have this fuel cell in several kinds of mobility, but also at homes. So we think we can generate energy with hydrogen, and we can give energy to our homes, to our factories, even to our towns. And right now, Toyota is developing in Japan a city called Oven City, where it's going to be a place where we're going to experience all these new technologies, and we can and then we can transpose these learnings to the other towns in the futures in order to have a better life and a better world for the society.
Ricardo, do you believe it's reasonable to think of hydrogen as a substitute for fossil fuel?
In Toyota, what we think for the future is that is not going to be only one type of technology. So in the future, we believe that there will be hydrogen, there will be electricity cars, plug-ins, and hybrids. So I think it could be a substitute, but it will take some time, and it will depend of the region. So there are some regions that this is more advanced, and other regions that are not so advanced in this process. So we think in the future there will be several solutions, and hydrogen will be one of those solutions in order to achieve zero emissions.
When you say in the future, you mean in 1930, 1940? You have an horizon?
That depends on this effort is not only of one brand. So Toyota is making these efforts and is collaborating with some governments and with other companies to try to do it faster. But this is an effort that we must share with all these scientists. So that will depend on this. For example, in some countries, when we launched the first generation of Mirai, there wasn't an infrastructure of hydrogen stations in Europe that was starting. Right now, with the second generation in the Nordic countries, and for example in Germany, there is already a good infrastructure of hydrogen. So there is already Mirai there. So it's ongoing. In Portugal, we still don't have a hydrogen station here. So the increase or the growing of hydrogen, for example, in Portugal, will depend on the infrastructure. So if we have the stations, I think that could be faster. If we don't have the station, that will take longer. So I cannot give you it's going to be in 1, 2, 3 years. It depends on this. This is something like our president, Mr. Akira Toyoda, says that hydrogen and the relation between cars and the infrastructure is like bees and flowers. Without flowers, we don't have bees, and without bees, we don't have flowers. So in the hydrogen, is the same thing. If we don't have the infrastructure, we cannot launch the products. So in our case, we have the products, we have Mirai, and we have the buses already in Portugal. And it's been announced this week by the Cascais mayor that we'll have buses and in Cascais, and also there will be a station in the next months. But the evolution of hydrogen in Portugal will depend how fast the infrastructure of stations will be implemented.
Now I call Tom Strang. Good morning, Tom. What is state of the art in the cruise industry when it comes to the use of hydrogen?
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me here today and to speak. So very similar to your other speakers, you know, this cruise industry, we're committed to decarbonization, and within CLIA Europe, who I'm representing here today, we're committed to the pathway towards net zero by 2050. But the state of the art is the picture behind me. You know, the state of the art today is LNG. That's our best available fuel today, but we recognize that that doesn't bring us to where we need to get to. So we need that hydrogen, even in its liquid form, its energy density is not sufficient for these types of ships. So a vessel like one behind me has an installed power demand of 64 megawatts. Today we have fuel cells running on hydrogen in the 250 to 500 kilowatt area that are marinized. And the challenge is really hydrogen as such will have opportunities, but perhaps not directly as a direct fuel, maybe not as liquid hydrogen. Even if we see a doubling or a significant improvement in efficiency in fuel cells compared to other combustion processes, then we're still going to be challenged. So really we think hydrogen is essential. It's a building block for these other fuels, whether it's ammonia, whether it's e-methanol, whether it's ELNG, whether it's one of these other fuel types. Hydrogen is the key component. And of course, at the moment, there isn't sufficient hydrogen to be able to meet that demand. And as mentioned earlier by colleagues, you know, if you look at the infrastructure for cars, if you look at the infrastructure for aircraft, etc., we need to build that. And to do that, we'll need to have support from both public support and then support from governments and others to build infrastructure. Built in Europe, of the cruise industry. The cruise industry, about 80% is built in Europe. So there's a real opportunity to help develop that green growth. And this is really essential to us. I think we're not convinced that hydrogen by itself, and I think is the fuel of the future. We need to see alternative pathways. We want to be fuel agnostic. We want to see all these different net zero fuels coming to market. A large number of those will be based upon hydrogen. So hydrogen is the essential building block.
You mentioned several difficulties to use hydrogen, but do you believe there is a potential for hydrogen in your industry, or it's a remote, something very remote?
I'm an engineer, I'm a naval architect by profession. I absolutely believe we can solve all the problems and challenges. That's part of our DNA. We want to make things work, and I'm sure that's the same everywhere. I think hydrogen will have a role to play in shipping. Whether in the cruise industry it will play a direct role will be challenging. There are safety issues that we need to overcome, but I'm convinced we can probably manage those. But the fundamental issue around infrastructure and the volume of hydrogen that's going to be necessary may make it challenging. I think it's more likely that we'll see hydrogen as the base and then turned into another type of fuel, potentially as e-methanol or maybe ammonia, or even ELNG in the future. I think that's the more likely approach for the cruise segment. I think in the broader shipping industry, for short sea shipping, hydrogen will definitely have a role to play, as we mentioned earlier. As one of the colleagues mentioned earlier, they could see some of the short sea shipping could potentially use hydrogen on a point-to-point basis where you have hydrogen storage and distribution. But infrastructure is going to be the real challenge. We've seen over the years, even with LNG, which is widely available as a commodity, it's not a commodity as a maritime fuel, and you have to build that infrastructure. In the same way, in the car industry, in the automotive industry, in the trucking industry, you've got to build that infrastructure to be able to support it. And that's really where one of the key challenges is. So I'm optimistic that we'll find solutions. We may generate hydrogen on board, or we may take on board ammonia, or we could take on board methanol and then convert it back into hydrogen to put it through a fuel cell. So yes, I think hydrogen has a definitive role to play. I'm not convinced at the moment that carrying around liquid hydrogen at minus 283 degrees Celsius is going to be that easy for us.
Yeah.
Lígia, given the fact that we are distant from a scenario where hydrogen would be commonly used, in the short term, what actions or commitments should we expect from the aviation sector towards the environment?
Well, that's not only a very interesting question, but it's also a daily question we deal with. So the European Union has set this target towards decarbonization to be net zero in 2050. So this is a global commitment. We as aviation, we have our own targets and objectives, and we are making our objectives even more ambitious. Towards the end of the year, IATA will also release the revised objectives. But it's not only hydrogen that we have in sight. Of course, we need to have more tangible and immediate efforts and goals to meet right now. We have, for instance, sustainable aviation fuels that can be produced with our waste, the municipal waste, the garbage, the rubbish that we create every day can be used to produce sustainable aviation fuels, for instance, and we have a contribution of all the stakeholders towards this. I'll give you an example. For instance, shorter routes or more direct routes will make the flight be more efficient. If the route is more direct and shorter, you will have less fuel burn. So this is an immediate contribution towards the environment. We have a lot of policies that need to be supported by governments. We need this governmental support, and we also need, as citizens, to be active on this. If I'm concerned with the CO2 emissions that I emit, and each one of us in the room, every time we fly, if we want to compensate our CO2 emissions, we can do that. We can, when we book a ticket, we can purchase or compensate paying the emissions that we make in terms of CO2. So there are a lot of areas. There is, for instance, a global carbon offset scheme for all carriers in the world for international flights to compensate their emissions. So there is no silver bullet, there is no standalone solution or technological solution or political solution that will solve it, but we need to go bit by bit, adding all the gains that we can towards this pathway to decarbonization and to have this net zero in 2050.
And in your take, is it crucial to have a partnership between state and private sector?
Yes.
Is it crucial?
It's mandatory to have everyone at the table discussing these topics, because we cannot, as an industry, be policymakers, but also policymakers cannot substitute the industry and the private sector. So there must be this dialogue and this balance between both, and in a cooperative way. We need to be honest and frank about our objectives, about our limitations, and how to overcome those limitations. So this dialogue is mandatory. It's really something that we need, and we have it, and we continue to strive for it in the future. It's part of my job, actually, to look for that dialogue to happen.
Jérémie, Lagarrigue, when we compare renewable energies like solar or wind with hydrogen, what are the main advantages and or disadvantages of each other? When you put one in one side the hydrogen, in the other side the solar or the wind energy.
Yeah. In fact, any energy has advantages and disadvantages, and what is very good when you mix all those energies is that you are directly seeing that they are complementary between all each other. As just Tom explained, we will not have one energy in the future. It will be a mix of the energy in the future, and I think Ricardo also explains that's the vision of Toyota that we definitely share. And the renewable energy has directly showing that. Just a simple example, we have seen a nice video about the place where you are. It's nice sun at the moment, but most of the time when there is a sun, there is no wind. And when there is wind, there is clouds, so there is less sun, and then you have wind. So when you mix windmills and the solar panel, then you have most of the time a sort of profile of production of renewable energies. When you can store the energy, and especially the renewable energy thanks to the hydrogen, it's very good because then you are not anymore limited to the production of these renewable energies. Most of the time, there is many now solar panels on the roof of buildings, and also some residential houses, where you are limited due to the fact that you cannot produce more than the energies that you are consuming. And thanks to hydrogen, this limitation can be overpassed, because then you can overproduce, you can produce the maximum of energy, and when you do not consume the energy straight away, you can store this energy. That was something that was not feasible in the past, because you can store in the batteries because it's a DC and it's quite complex, and the AC voltage was not also, there was no solution to store the energy except storing some water in the mountain. So I think the mix of energy will be an answer about the challenge that we're all facing together to respect the objective of the world and for the next generation. And what Toyota is showing with the Toyota Mirai, it's a very nice example about a car that can depollute to the air. And what we are doing with Tom in the boat industry, in the shipping industry, it's also a nice example. We definitely today cannot cross the Atlantic with the hydrogen storage because the liquid hydrogen is not something regulated today. But we just launched 2 weeks ago the first serial production hydrogen vessel. It's a 12-meter boat. It's a pleasure boat that anyone can afford. And if there is station, then you can use the boat. And it's like also the chicken and egg solution. And I think all my friends on the panel say the same thing. It will be depending on the government and the private investment, because we need to have some consumers of the hydrogen, while we also need to have the distribution of the hydrogen. And the two will come at the same time. And it's also nice for me because I made some conference in many countries, and we can see that the evolution of hydrogen in all the countries are all following the same line, but not at the same timing. And we can see that, as usual, the north of Europe is more advanced in developing those technologies. So there is more than 100 and some countries, thousands of hydrogen stations, while in south of France, where I live in south of France, for example, there is no station, and in north of France, there is a lot of hydrogen stations. And I think in south of Europe is more or less the same. And I'm really looking forward to see the evolution of those things. Thanks to the aviation, for example, the aviation, we have many demand to use the hydrogen generator just behind me to plug the plane when they're at the airport. And also many new consumption of hydrogen. We develop the hydrogen society, but we do not have to see the hydrogen as the only solution. It will be a friend of the renewable energies and part of the mix of the energy of the future.
Ricardo, when we talk about cars, we talk about electric cars. We don't associate automobility with hydrogen. Is the automotive industry really investing in this field, or that's not true?
You're muted.
You're muted.
I'm not sure if we can listen, Ricardo,
sorry,
now.
I was muted.
Oh, okay.
So I was saying that depends on the companies. So there are some car companies like Toyota and Hyundai also that are investing in hydrogen. But there are other companies that are, like I've said in the beginning, they are putting all the resources in only one type of technology. So that depends on the companies. In Toyota, I will not say that we are visionaries, but like in the hybrids, when we started, nobody believed in Toyota, and we made our path. In hydrogen, I think is the same thing. Toyota is a trusted partner to develop this kind of products. So this is our way. I cannot speak for the other companies, but I think is more or less divided. The way if we go to hydrogen or maintain electric is more or less divided in the automotive industry, and we are in the side of hydrogen, and we believe that it's going to be. It's not going to be. It's already here. We're already producing Mirai, so it's already here. So it's part of the present and the future.
Thank you, Ricardo. Tom, how to remain profitable given the high cost of hydrogen?
Well, thank you very much for the very difficult question. Given the current situation with the cruise industry, it's difficult to remain profitable full stop at the moment. We've had the worst crisis in our industry, but we're coming back strongly. We're beginning to see cruises starting again. It's going to be a challenge, and this is one of the things that we really need to understand how this is going to work in the future. If we look at some of the price estimates we've seen around what the cost of hydrogen at scale will be, or even the renewable fuels that you make from hydrogen, they're very significant. But I'm encouraged by the fact that we've seen the price of renewable electricity drop dramatically in recent years. That then leads us to be able to create hydrogen. Of course, there's a big infrastructure cost that has to be borne, and that's something that the question is should that be borne just by the consumer, or does society have a role to play in developing that infrastructure as well? I think clearly the consumer is going to have to end up paying more for their fuel in the future, but that's part of the whole debate in society at the moment. What are we going to be prepared to pay as we move forward? It's almost impossible to say how we can, but we have to afford it. We believe that decarbonization is essential. We know that there are going to be challenges. We're talking both at the EU and the IMO level about market-based mechanisms and how they could impact the price of bunker fuels. And as a bunker fuel of the future, that would be hydrogen and hydrogen-derived fuels. So these are issues that are, right now being very, very heavily debated. And you'll have seen announcements in the shipping sector by some of the major transportation organizations talking about, a carbon price and different elements. All of this is on the table and is being discussed right now. But at the end of the day, that will then mean, companies will have to invest in more efficient ships. One thing that always makes sense is to make your unit use of energy reduced per kilometer or per person for whatever metric you use. And then we have to look and see how we can make that more affordable within the overall offering of the product.
Thanks, Tom. And one last question for Lígia. Lígia, hydrogen is fairly new in aviation, but it's already common in some space industries. Can you give any examples?
Yes, and thank you also for raising the question of costs to Tom. I'm very happy that it didn't come to me, the question. Thank you so much. Thank you. So yes, it's undeniable that aviation is fairly new in this era of hydrogen. And as a matter of fact, NASA has used liquid hydrogen since the 70s to propel the space shuttle and other rockets into orbit. So this is something that for us, for aviation, is new, and it's not happening in the next 10 years, but NASA has been using it. Some of the thing and curiosity is that the cells, the hydrogen cells, have been used to power electricity or the electric systems in those shuttles, and we know that the byproduct of those of hydrogen is water, is clean water. So this was also used by the space crew. They were drinking this water, this byproduct, let's say the waste of this energy produced. So aircrew was drinking this water. So we can see the benefits of hydrogen, and we can see that is already being used in automotive and in space. We just need to absorb and to bring to aviation the good practices, the good elements of it. Of course, we have our own challenges. Aviation is different from space and from automotive or ships, but we are together in this learning curve and in this process towards decarbonization.
Thanks, Lígia. I think
you,
our time is up. Thank you also, Ricardo, Tom, and Jérémie, and have a good day. And now I think we are.
Vamos continuar com a Filomena. Olá, Filomena.
Oh my God, Mr. Vítor Gonçalves, I was trying to speak English as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Vítor Gonçalves. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to meet you and to be in the same stage.
Yes. A partir de hoje só vou falar inglês consigo. Muito obrigada a todos. Muito obrigada e obrigada aí em casa também por continuarem a seguir-nos. Este debate deixa muitas questões também para que possamos desenvolver aqui nos próximos dias. Queria só dizer-vos que continuamos em waterworldforum.com. Se ainda não fizeram, façam-no agora. Partilhem este site. Estamos a falar de temas tão importantes que é tão importante que cheguemos a mais e mais pessoas. Já sabem, waterworldforum.com. Não custa nada e ajuda a gente.